So I don't know about you guys, but I personally think the plan at Old Trafford this summer seems pretty obvious. The club wants to give Ruben Amorim a brand new, shiny front three to work with next season, in the hope that we can finally score some goals and not finish solo down the goal scoring charts in the Premier League. So far, we have already signed Cunha for the front three. We look, I would say, rather close to signing Brian Mbeumo, but there is still a problem up front. We can't seem to get a striker through the door or even into really advanced negotiations. So perhaps we might need to look inside the club for solutions. And someone that you guys have been asking me about in the comments is Joshua Zirkzee. So does that work? Does this front three make sense? Let's take a look. So we have of course already done a few of these videos before, so you know how this is going to work. Before we can talk about the collective and how they could potentially play together, we need to talk about the individuals and their individual strengths. Starting off with Cunha, we will keep this fairly brief because we have covered him a lot recently. We know what he's good at. He wants to get the ball in these positions and he wants to carry the ball forward. Cunha is a very, very good ball carrier, someone who drives through the heart of the opposition very, very effectively. And what that gives him is tactical gravity. Cunha is great at making space for other people. You see, when he picks the ball up in these positions, teams know that he can drive forward with the ball. So what they do is they react. They look to get people around him. People move towards Cunha because they know that he can cause a lot of problems. But this creates space. First of all, in this wide position here, potentially for the wing-back, or in behind the defence for a striker to run onto. So this is something that Cunha is actually very, very good at. I also think he's pretty good with his combination play as well as he moves towards the final third. So looking to pick the ball up, perhaps combine with a striker and play 1-2s, or perhaps with the wing-back as well. Play 1-2s in these positions so that he can get himself into goal-scoring situations. And once in those goal-scoring situations, Cunha is a goal scorer. Now, when we look at Brian Mbeumo on the other side, we are going to see some similarities in terms of the skill set and also some differences. And also, I know we haven't actually signed Mbeumo yet, he isn't a Manchester United player, but we keep getting linked with him and a lot of people are asking the question about this front three, so that's why we're talking about it today. In terms of similarities and skill set, Mbeumo is once again a very good ball carrier. We've discussed this a lot recently, particularly in transition. He can drive forward through the opposition's half, and that's something potentially very useful for Manchester United. However, somewhere where Mbeumo perhaps differs from Cunha is the way that he attacks space. You see, Cunha was all about creating space, picking the ball up and drawing people towards him, and Mbeumo doesn't really want to do that. He wants to attack space. So he wants to move into these positions here, between opposition defenders. He wants to attack large gaps in the opposition defence. So this is where they will perhaps vary a little bit with the way that they approach the final third. In terms of once in the final third, Mbeumo is really effective, really effective. We've seen already that he is a good crosser, particularly towards the back post. And of course, once again, he is a good finisher. So we've spoken about the left side of the attack, we've spoken about the right side of the attack. Now we need to discuss the man in the middle. Of course, in this hypothetical front three, that is going to be Joshua Zirkzee. What is his skill set and what does he bring to the team? Well, the first thing that he brings is the ability to operate in tight spaces. He's got a good first touch under pressure, really good at controlling the ball. He's quite an aesthetic player, quite a silky player to watch, really good under pressure, got a good first touch, and he's also a good passer. His combination work is quite effective. Popping the ball about in these areas, he wants to come deeper and combine with people. Once again, play 1-2s. He wants to bring other people into the game. Zirkzee is very, very effective in that way. He also, a bit like Cunha, is good at creating space for other people. You see, this isn't a proper striker. He labelled himself as a sort of 9.5, and that's because he doesn't want to necessarily play up here, in behind the opposition defence. He wants to come deeper towards the ball, and this creates space because opposition centre-backs feel they have to follow him, and that, of course, leaves spaces in behind the opposition. And of course, on top of all of that, I also think Zirkzee is a pretty good ball carrier. Not quite as good as the other two, but for a striker, he's quite silky with the way that he plays and he can drag his team forward. So that is how the three of them sort of profile in terms of individuals, what they bring individually to a football team, their characteristics and their skill set. But of course, we now have to talk about a collective, because just because you get three good footballers, which we have here, and force them all together, it doesn't mean they are guaranteed to perform. It has to work. They have to understand each other's game. They have to make sense next to each other, really. There has to be a synergy with the way that they play. The question is, do we get it from this front three? Well, I think we potentially do, because we know that Ruben Amorim's system will put them fairly close together in these positions. They will be nice and close to each other, so they will be able to combine with each other. And as we've said already, that will suit both Cunha and Zirkzee. They like to combine with people. They like to play close to people. I also think what we've got here, though, is three players that realistically could play all three positions in the front three. You know, Zirkzee I think can play as a striker, the right 10 or the left 10. I think Cunha could do the same, and I also think the same for Cunha and Mbeumo as well. And that is potentially a nightmare for the opposition to deal with. You see, what defenders love is having a player that they can mark. Someone who they know where they're going to go, they know who they're following, they can go tight, they can drop off, but they know who they're dealing with. When you suddenly get a front three that can rotate and move into different positions in the final third, taking up different areas, it becomes a nightmare for these two players here because they don't know who to mark. Let's say Zirkzee starts up front in this position here. As he drops deep, the centre-back might follow him. But what if Mbeumo now wants to go play up front? What does the centre-back now do? These are the questions that you ask when you've got a fluid front three. And these three could certainly do that. Something else that you get from these three as a collective is just immense ball carrying. In terms of some slightly different metrics in the Premier League, all three of them rank incredibly well for carries either into the final third or into the penalty area. Again, that is a nightmare for opposition defenders to deal with. It is so difficult dealing with players, particularly in the modern game, I feel. Dealing with players that want to go 1v1, that want to carry the ball forward, that want to take responsibility. One of the reasons for that is because of the nature of man-to-man pressing at the moment. We see lots of teams sort of match up all over the pitch, they pick up a player each, and what that means is if you get players, particularly like our front three here, who can win their little 1v1 battles, then it causes huge problems for the opposition. Let's say Cunha's got the ball out here and he's 1v1. If he can beat his man, it asks huge questions of the next defender. Should he be sticking to his man, tight on Zirkzee, or should he be coming across to deal with the player on the ball? That's what you get when you get ball carriers. They are structure breakers, is how I like to refer to them. Players that can break game plans. They can break opposition structures and setups because they literally drive through the setups. They take multiple players out of the game and make it incredibly difficult to deal with. And this is why I think on face value, this front three can work. You know, they're all good ball carriers, they're all good technicians, and I would say collectively they're all pretty good goal scorers as well. I know that Zirkzee didn't have a great season last year, but the season before that, in Serie A, he actually did pretty well, and that's why United signed him. And of course, in the case of the other two, we saw last season just how effective they could be. I don't know that any of them would hit 20 goals in a Premier League season, but between them, if they can all pick up 12 to 16, that could be really effective. So we've got three players here who can link with each other, who can combine with each other, who can carry the ball, who can interchange in terms of their positions and score goals. Looks pretty good to me. Now, unfortunately, it isn't actually quite as simple as that. You see, it's quite rare to be able to take two players, pluck them out of thin air, and put them into a dysfunctioning team, and suddenly the attack is fixed. This isn't perfect for Manchester United. I like the idea of the front three, and I see why people certainly see some benefit behind using these three players, but I'm not sure they entirely complement each other. Straight away, first of all, is there enough runners in the team? We know that we immediately lack width in these positions here because our wing-backs start a little bit deeper. So that's potentially Dorgu and Ahmad on the two sides. They start deeper than what traditional wingers do. That means that the front three need to be able to carry the running threat, the running load, if you like. They need to be the three stretching the opposition back. But we already know that Cunha doesn't really like to do that. He wants to come towards the ball for extra touches. And it is also the same for Joshua Zirkzee as well. He wants to come towards the ball. Now, yes, Mbeumo will go the other way. He will look to run in behind the opposition defence, but I'm not sure it's enough. Across our front five here, really, we've only got one runner who's going to stretch and really test the opposition backline. I'm not quite sure that that's enough. Another slight concern I would have is the areas that people are dropping into. You see, Cunha wants to operate in this left half space and drop deeper. If we look at where Zirkzee likes to drop deep, it tends to be towards the left half space, moving into these positions here. We also know that Dorgu often likes to carry the ball inside the pitch, and if Bruno Fernandes plays left central midfield, he likes to move into that position here. Suddenly, this is all rather crowded. Now, yes, we've got players near each other, which is good. They can combine and pass, but ultimately, they're a little bit too close to each other and a little bit too easy to cover defensively. So that would be a concern. Now, that can be addressed. Someone like Dorgu could simply be told to hold a higher and wider starting position. He could be moved out into this position here. Bruno Fernandes could be swapped to the other side of midfield with a more defensive player playing this role, and maybe we could ask Zirkzee to play more central. Suddenly that gives us a little bit more balance. But I am just worried about the combination of runners and players that want to come towards the ball. I'm not sure that this attacking setup quite gets it right, not naturally anyway. Something else that came to my head when I was looking at this front three was how it would work from a defensive point of view. Modern football is all about pressing high and trying to get pressure on the ball so that the opposition can't dominate possession. And it's been a talking point since Ruben Amorim came into the club because his press hasn't always been aggressive enough. And I've been thinking about ways that this front three could work in a pressing structure. You know, Cunha, Zirkzee, and Mbeumo, could they work as a pressing front three together? And I actually think that they could, using a slightly different structure to what we've seen, certainly regularly, I would say, since Ruben Amorim has been at Old Trafford. But he has used this shape on an occasion or two, so just hear me out. What we have seen a few times is Manchester United pressing in more of a diamond. So we see two inside forwards here, moving into the two striker positions. We then see our actual striker, so Zirkzee on this occasion, dropping deeper onto the pivot. So this is the start. We've got the front two, and then we've got the pivot here. Then what we will often see is one of the wing-backs dropping deep into the back line, Manchester United shifting to a back four, and then the rest of the team slowly forming a diamond. And if we just look at the personnel for a second, in terms of in high pressing situations, I do think that this diamond could possibly work. It's not ideal for Ahmad in terms of his positioning on the side of midfield, but it is a role that he has played defensively at times this season, and it could work for Manchester United. So I just thought that that was something rather interesting to point out. Now, as an overall sort of summary, I don't mind this front three at all. I think there's a lot of quality and a lot of qualities that the current front three at United actually lacks in terms of the synergy, the ability for players to get close to each other, the ball carrying, the ability to take defenders on, the ability to score goals. I think that would all be rather positive. However, I do just have slight concerns in terms of the balance and where players go. Again, if you get too many players coming towards the ball, you don't stretch your position. On the other side of it, if you have too many players going in behind, then you have no one to pass to. Getting that balance is so important in football. It's quite a simple idea, getting that balance, but I still feel it is key to any successful team. Just look at the successful teams from the past season or so. Manchester United need to make sure they get that right, not just with the front three, but also the midfield and the two wing-backs. And I'm not sure that this front three does that. So I wouldn't mind seeing this front three for a few games across the course of a season. You know, it's going to happen sometimes. Players are going to pick up injuries. You'll need rotation. So I dare say, if Mbeumo signs for the club, we would see this front three in some games. And to an extent, I think it could work because of the reasons we've discussed. However, if we were to see it as our front three for 30 of the 38 Premier League games next season, I do just feel that we would find ourselves a little bit stuck, a little bit lacking in balance at times. So it's a nice front three. I don't think it's a great front three. I think we can still do a little bit better if we've got the money, that is, to go and sign a different profile of striker, someone who will get into that channel a little bit more, so that when Cunha over here drops a little bit deeper, we have a striker who can just bend in behind and attack that space. That is something that I would prefer when we're looking at our striker. It is difficult to find though, so let me know in the comments what you would do. Would you go and spend big money on a striker? And if so, who? Is it Mateta? Is it a Katike? Is Osimhen possible? I don't know. Or would you save the money, keep Joshua Zirkzee and Rasmus Højlund, who we haven't even discussed today, competing for the spot up front, and perhaps spend big money on a midfielder instead? Let me know what you would do in the comments down below. But apart from that, I believe, just looking across, I believe that is everything for today's video. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.